He was waiting for his mail-order bride, but a mysterious Chinese woman showed up. Daniel lived in a quiet town where most days looked the same. The streets were calm, the shops closed early, and people knew each other by name. For many years he had lived alone in a small wooden house near the edge of town. It was not a big house, but it was neat and clean. He had built it with his own hands when he was younger. Back then he thought his life would turn out differently. He thought there would be laughter in the kitchen, someone to share dinner with, and warm conversations before sleep. But life had taken another path. As the years passed, Daniel got used to silence. He woke up early every morning, made a simple breakfast, and sat by the window with his cup of tea. From there, he could see the road and the old oak tree across from his house. He often watched people pass by and wondered what their lives were like. Some days he went to work at a small repair shop in town. Other days he stayed home and worked on little projects, fixing things that didn't really need fixing. It kept his hands busy even when his mind felt heavy. The evenings were the hardest. When the sun went down and the town became quiet, Daniel felt the weight of his loneliness the most. He would sit on his porch and listen to the sound of crickets, thinking about how time had moved so fast. He wasn't bitter or angry, just tired of being alone. He had friends in town, but they all had families of their own. They had dinners to attend, children to care for, and lives that were full. Daniel didn't want to bother anyone. He didn't want to feel like an extra chair at someone else's table. One night, while using his old computer, Daniel came across an advertisement for a marriage introduction service. At first, he laughed at the idea. It felt strange and a little embarrassing. He had never imagined that he would consider something like that. But the more he thought about it, the more it stayed in his mind. He realized that waiting for life to change on its own hadn't worked. Maybe he needed to try something new, even if it felt uncomfortable. It took him several days to gather the courage to sign up. He read the information carefully and filled out the forms slowly. He described himself honestly. He wrote about his simple life, his small house, and his hope to find someone kind. He didn't try to sound impressive. He just wanted to be real. After sending his information, he almost forgot about it. He assumed nothing would come of it. Then, a few weeks later, he received a letter. The letter was written in neat handwriting. It was from a woman named May. She introduced herself politely and shared a little about her life. She wrote about wanting a peaceful future and about looking for someone sincere. Her words were calm and thoughtful. Daniel read the letter more than once. Something about it felt genuine. He didn't feel rushed or pressured. Instead, he felt curious. He decided to reply. At first, his letters were short and careful. He wasn't sure what to say or how much to share. But as time passed, their letters became longer. May wrote about her daily life, her hopes, and her desire to start fresh somewhere new. Daniel wrote about the town, his house, and the quiet routines he followed. Slowly, their letters became something he looked forward to. He checked the mailbox every day, sometimes twice. For the first time in many years, Daniel felt a small spark of excitement. He found himself smiling while reading her words. He imagined what it would be like to meet her in person. He pictured someone sitting across from him at the dinner table, someone to talk to at the end of the day. It felt almost unreal, but he allowed himself to hope. After several months of letters, they began to talk about meeting. The idea made Daniel nervous, but also hopeful. They agreed on a plan. May would travel to his town. They would meet at the train station, and from there they would begin to learn about each other in person. It sounded simple, but to Daniel it felt like a big moment. A new chapter might finally begin. Once the date was set, Daniel became busy with preparations. He wanted everything to be perfect. He cleaned the house from top to bottom. He fixed a loose step on the porch and repainted the front door. He bought fresh curtains and placed a small vase of flowers on the kitchen table. He even planted new flowers outside, hoping they would bloom soon. Every small task gave him a sense of purpose. The neighbors began to notice the changes. They saw him working in the yard more often and carrying bags from the store. Some of them asked questions, and Daniel shared a little about what was happening. Most people smiled and wished him well. A few seemed surprised, but Daniel didn't let that bother him. For once, he felt like something good was on its way. As the arrival day got closer, Daniel felt both excited and nervous. He practiced what he might say when they first met. He wondered if she would recognize him right away. He thought about whether she would like the house or the town. He wanted her to feel welcome and comfortable. He wanted her to feel safe. The night before her arrival, Daniel could hardly sleep. He kept thinking about the moment the train would stop and the passengers would step off. He imagined seeing her face for the first time. Would she smile? Would she feel nervous too? He hoped their first meeting would be warm and easy. Early the next morning, he woke up before sunrise. He dressed carefully and checked the house one last time. He made sure everything was in order. Then he picked up a simple bouquet of flowers and headed to the train station. The air was cool, and the sky was just beginning to brighten. The town was still quiet, with only a few cars on the road. When he arrived at the station, he realized he was very early. He didn't mind. He sat on a bench and waited. As time passed, more people began to gather. Some were waiting for family members, others for friends. Daniel held the flowers in his hands and watched the tracks. His heart beat a little faster with every passing minute. Finally, he heard the distant sound of the train. It grew louder as it approached. Daniel stood up and took a deep breath. The train pulled into the station, and the doors opened. Passengers began to step out one by one. Daniel looked at each face carefully, searching for the woman he had seen in the photos. He tried to stay calm, but his hands felt slightly shaky. A few moments passed. Then he noticed a woman walking toward him. She looked calm and composed, carrying a small bag, but something felt different. She didn't look like the person he had expected. Daniel felt a sudden wave of confusion. He wondered if he had made a mistake. He looked around again, thinking maybe he had missed someone. But the woman stopped in front of him and spoke his name gently. Daniel felt his thoughts freeze for a moment. He stared at her, unsure what to say. She introduced herself politely, but not with the name he had been expecting. Instead, she said her name was Lynn. She held out an envelope and explained that she had something important to give him. Daniel's heart sank slightly. He didn't understand what was happening. This was not the moment he had imagined. The flowers in his hands suddenly felt heavy. He took the envelope slowly and looked at it. The handwriting on it looked familiar. For a brief moment, everything around him felt quiet, even though the station was busy. He realized that the day he had been waiting for had taken an unexpected turn. The future he had carefully imagined was no longer clear. Yet, as he stood there, looking at the woman in front of him, he sensed that this meeting still mattered in some way. Daniel stood still on the platform, holding the envelope in one hand and the small bouquet in the other. For a moment he did not know what to say. The woman in front of him looked calm, but he could see a hint of nervousness in her eyes. People walked past him, pulling their luggage and greeting loved ones. But Daniel felt like he was standing inside a quiet bubble. The day he had imagined for months had suddenly changed. He opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a letter written in the same neat handwriting he had come to recognize. His hands felt slightly shaky as he read the first few lines. The letter was from May. She wrote that she was sorry for the confusion and that something unexpected had happened in her life. She explained that she could not make the journey as planned. Instead, she had asked Lynn to travel and deliver the message in person. She asked Daniel to listen to Lynn and to trust that she meant no harm. The letter was short, but sincere. Daniel read it twice. Each time the words felt heavier. He had spent months preparing for a new beginning, and now he was standing in front of someone he had never spoken to before. He looked up at Lynn. She stood quietly, giving him space to process everything. She did not rush him or speak too much. She simply waited. "I'm sorry," she said softly after a moment. "I know this is not what you expected." Daniel nodded slowly. "No, it isn't," he admitted. His voice sounded calm, but inside he felt a mix of disappointment and confusion. He had imagined a different scene for so long. He had pictured a warm greeting, a first conversation full of hope. Instead, he was holding a letter that changed everything. They stood there for a few seconds, unsure of what to do next. Finally, Daniel took a deep breath and looked around the station. It did not feel right to leave Lynn standing there with nowhere to go. She had traveled a long distance, and she seemed respectful and honest. Even though he felt disappointed, he could not ignore her situation.
Do you,
Have a place to stay? He asked carefully. Lynn shook her head.
Not yet. I came here only to give you the letter.
I didn't know what would happen after that. Daniel thought for a moment. He had always tried to be a kind person. Even though his plans had fallen apart, he knew he could not just walk away. You can come to my house for now, he said slowly. Just until we figure things out. Are you sure? I don't want to cause trouble. It's not trouble, Daniel replied. You've come a long way. We can talk more when we get there. They left the station together and walked toward Daniel's truck. The ride back to his house was quiet at first. Daniel focused on the road, trying to organize his thoughts. Lynn sat in the passenger seat, holding her small bag. She looked out the window at the town, taking in the quiet streets and small houses. It was different from the busy places she had known before. After a few minutes, she spoke. Thank you for not leaving me at the station, she said gently. Daniel nodded. Anyone would do the same, he replied. Though he wasn't entirely sure that was true, he kept his tone calm, even though his mind was still racing with questions. He wanted to understand what had happened and why everything had changed so suddenly. When they reached his house, Daniel parked the truck and stepped out. He felt a strange mix of emotions as he unlocked the door. He had spent so much time preparing this place for someone else. Now he was bringing in a person he had never expected to meet. Still, he reminded himself to stay calm and respectful. Lynn stepped inside carefully, looking around the house. It was simple, but tidy. The fresh curtains hung by the windows, and the flowers on the table added a warm touch. She noticed the effort that had gone into preparing the space. It made her feel both grateful and a little sad for him. I'm sorry things turned out this way, she said quietly. Daniel set the flowers on the table and gave a small nod. Life doesn't always go as planned, he replied. Let's sit down and talk. They sat at the kitchen table, facing each other. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Lynn began to explain. She spoke slowly, choosing her words carefully. She said she had known May for some time and had been helping her with travel plans and paperwork. But recently, something in May's life had changed. It was a situation that required her to stay where she was. She had asked Lynn to deliver the letter because she trusted her to explain things honestly. Lynn made it clear that she had not come to replace anyone or to create confusion. She simply needed to pass along the message and figure out her own next steps. She had taken the journey because she felt responsible for helping. She also admitted that she did not have a clear plan for what to do after arriving. Daniel listened quietly. He appreciated that she was being honest. Even though he felt disappointed, he could see that Lynn was in a difficult position too. She had traveled far without knowing what would happen. That took courage. They talked for a long time. Lynn shared more about her life and the challenges she had faced. She spoke about leaving her home country to support her family, and about the hard choices she had made along the way. She did not ask for sympathy, she simply told her story in a calm and steady voice. Daniel found himself listening more than speaking. At first, he had felt only disappointment. But as he heard her story, he began to feel understanding. Life had not gone the way either of them had planned. They were both standing in a moment that felt uncertain. As the evening went on, Daniel made a simple dinner. They ate quietly at first, then began to talk again. The conversation became easier. They spoke about the town, about work, and about what might happen next. There was no pressure, no expectations. Just two people trying to make sense of an unexpected situation. Later that night, Daniel showed Lynn the guest room. It was small, but comfortable. He told her she could stay there for a few days while they figured things out. She thanked him sincerely. Before going to bed, Daniel stepped outside onto the porch. The night air felt cool and calm. He looked up at the sky and let out a slow breath. The day had not gone as planned. The future he had imagined had shifted in a single moment. But as he stood there, he realized that life sometimes moved in ways no one could predict. He did not know what would happen next, but he knew that the story was not over. Something unexpected had begun, even if he didn't yet understand what it meant. The next morning, Daniel woke up earlier than usual. For a few seconds, he forgot everything that had happened the day before. Then he remembered the train station, the letter, and the unexpected guest now staying in his house. He sat up slowly and listened. The house was quiet, just like always, but there was a different feeling in the air. It was no longer the silence of complete loneliness. Someone else was there. He walked into the kitchen and started making tea. As he placed 2 cups on the table, he paused for a moment. He wasn't used to doing that. For years, he had prepared everything for just himself. Now, without thinking, he had set out an extra cup. A few minutes later, Lynn entered the kitchen. She greeted him politely and offered a small smile. She looked a bit tired, but calm. "Good morning," she said softly. "Good morning," Daniel replied. "I made tea." They sat at the table together. The conversation started slowly. Both of them were careful with their words. They were still getting used to this new situation. After a while, Daniel asked, "What will you do now?" Lynn thought for a moment before answering. "I'm not sure yet," she admitted. "I came here to deliver the letter. After that, I plan to find work and a place to stay somewhere nearby." "But I didn't expect things to feel this uncertain." Daniel nodded. He understood that feeling. His own plans had also fallen apart. Still, he knew that worrying too much would not help either of them. "You can stay here for a few days," he said, "until you decide what to do. There's no rush." Lynn looked relieved.
"Thank you." "I don't want to cause trouble for you." "You're not causing trouble," Daniel replied.
"We just need time to think." After breakfast, Daniel went to work at the repair shop. As he fixed tools and checked machines, his mind kept drifting back to the situation at home. He had imagined a very different life for himself. He had imagined welcoming someone as a partner. Instead, he was helping someone who needed time and support. It wasn't what he had planned, but it didn't feel wrong either. In a strange way, it felt meaningful. Meanwhile, Lynn stayed at the house. She cleaned the kitchen and organized a few things, hoping to show respect for Daniel's kindness. She didn't want him to feel burdened. Later, she stepped outside and looked at the quiet road. The town felt peaceful, very different from the busy places she had known. She took a deep breath and tried to calm her thoughts. She knew she needed to find a way forward, but she also felt grateful for the temporary safety she had found. When Daniel returned home that evening, he noticed that the house looked even neater than before. Lynn had prepared a simple meal. They sat down together and began to talk more openly than they had the previous day. The awkwardness slowly started to fade. Instead of focusing only on what had gone wrong, they began to talk about their lives. Lynn shared more details about her journey. She spoke about working hard in different places and about sending money home to help her family. She talked about the sacrifices she had made and the lessons she had learned. Her voice was steady, and she spoke with honesty. She didn't try to make her story sound dramatic. She simply explained what life had been like for her. Daniel listened carefully. He realized that Lynn had faced many challenges, but had remained strong. He respected that. In return, he shared parts of his own life. He talked about growing up in the town, about building the house, and about the years he had spent living quietly. He admitted that loneliness had been difficult, but he had learned to manage it. As the days passed, their conversations became more natural. They spoke while cooking, while sitting on the porch, and sometimes while working on small tasks around the house. Lynn helped with chores and tried to contribute in any way she could. Daniel appreciated her effort. He began to feel less alone in his daily routine. One afternoon, they went into town together. Lynn wanted to look for small job opportunities. They walked past shops and cafes, and Daniel introduced her to a few people he knew. Some were curious but polite. Lynn greeted everyone with respect. She spoke carefully and listened more than she talked. By the end of the day, she had found a small part-time job at a local store. It wasn't much, but it was a start. That evening, Daniel felt a quiet sense of relief. Lynn was taking steps toward independence. She wasn't planning to stay forever or depend on him completely. She just needed time to get settled. That made him feel more comfortable about the situation. As the weeks went by, their friendship grew stronger. They learned about each other's habits and routines. They laughed over small things, like burnt toast or a funny story from town. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset from the porch. It felt peaceful. Daniel also began to reflect on his own expectations. He had spent so long imagining a specific future that he hadn't considered how life might surprise him. Lynn's presence reminded him that meaningful connections could form in unexpected ways. He no longer felt only disappointment. Instead, he felt a sense of purpose. Helping someone during a difficult time made his own life feel more meaningful. Lynn, too, felt grateful. She had worried about being alone in a new place, but Daniel's kindness gave her time to breathe and think clearly. She worked hard at her job and saved what she could. She also helped Daniel around the house, fixing small things and keeping the place tidy. She wanted to show appreciation through her actions. They did not rush anything or place pressure on the future. They simply allowed their friendship to grow naturally. Both of them understood that this situation was temporary, but it still mattered. It was a chapter that neither had planned, yet it was shaping them in quiet ways. One evening, as they sat outside watching the sky change colors, Daniel realized something important. The life he had imagined had not happened, but something else had taken its place. It was not a perfect story, but it was real. It was filled with understanding, patience, and small moments of connection. He felt calmer than he had in a long time. Lynn looked at the peaceful street and said softly, "Sometimes life takes us somewhere unexpected." Daniel nodded. "But sometimes that place teaches us something we needed to learn." They sat there in silence for a while, listening to the evening sounds. Neither of them knew exactly what the future would bring, but they both knew that the present moment had value, and for now, that was enough. As the weeks slowly turned into months, the quiet routine inside Daniel's small house began to feel different from the lonely routine he had lived with for years. Nothing dramatic had changed on the outside. The same narrow road stretched past his home. The same oak tree stood across from the porch. The same small shops in town opened in the morning and closed early in the evening. But inside the house, there was now movement, conversation, and the soft sound of another person living life beside him. Lynn adjusted to the town step by step. At first, everything felt new to her. The calm streets, the friendly but curious neighbors, and the slow pace of daily life were very different from the busy places she had known before. She took her time learning the routines of the town. She woke early, helped around the house, and then went to her part-time job at the small local store. The job was simple. She helped arrange items on shelves, greeted customers politely, and learned the names of people who came in regularly. Most people were kind to her. Some were curious, but they respected her quiet nature. Daniel noticed how hard she worked. She never complained and always tried to contribute. In the evenings, she often cooked simple meals, using whatever ingredients they had. Sometimes she tried recipes from her own culture, and other times she cooked the kind of food Daniel was used to. They shared meals at the small kitchen table, talking about their day. These conversations were not always deep or serious. Often they were about simple things. A funny moment at the store, a neighbor's new dog, or a repair job Daniel had finished. But those simple talks made the house feel warm. At first, Daniel worried about what people in town might think. He knew that small towns could be full of questions and quiet whispers, but over time he realized that most people respected their privacy. They saw that Lynn was working hard and behaving with kindness. Some neighbors even greeted her warmly when she walked down the street. A few offered help or small pieces of advice about living in the town. Lynn always responded politely and with gratitude. One afternoon, Daniel invited Lynn to join him at a local community gathering. It was a small event held in the town hall, where people shared food and talked about local news. Lynn felt nervous at first, but she agreed to go. She wanted to understand the town better and show respect for the community that had welcomed her. When they arrived, several people greeted them kindly. The atmosphere was friendly and relaxed. Lynn listened carefully to conversations and spoke when she felt comfortable. By the end of the evening, she felt less like a stranger and more like someone who belonged, at least a little. Daniel watched this with quiet satisfaction. He had not expected his life to take this turn. He had imagined welcoming a partner and building a future together. Instead, he had found himself sharing his home with someone who needed time and support. But as he observed Lynn becoming more confident and settled, he realized that this unexpected chapter had brought meaning to his life in a different way. He also noticed changes within himself. Before, his days had felt repetitive and heavy. Now, they felt more balanced. There was someone to talk to in the mornings and someone to share dinner with in the evenings. He still valued his quiet time, but the loneliness that had once filled his house had softened. He no longer felt like he was waiting for life to begin. Life was already happening around him. Lynn, too, felt a shift in her perspective. She had arrived in the town feeling uncertain and worried about the future. But Daniel's steady kindness gave her a sense of safety she had not expected. She worked hard at her job and saved money carefully. She also spent time thinking about what she wanted for her future. She did not want to depend on anyone for too long. She wanted to stand on her own and build a stable life. Still, she knew she would always be grateful for the time Daniel had given her. Their friendship grew stronger through shared routines. On weekends, they sometimes worked in the yard together, trimming plants or fixing small things around the house. Other times, they walked through the town or sat on the porch watching the sunset. They talked about their past experiences and about the lessons they had learned. There was no pressure between them, no expectations that either of them had to meet. They simply respected each other and supported each other in small, everyday ways. One evening, after a long day at work, Lynn received a message that made her pause. It was about an opportunity in a nearby city. A friend had told her about a better job and a chance to start fresh in a place with more options. She felt both excited and nervous. The idea of moving forward on her own was something she had been working toward. But it also meant leaving the place where she had found unexpected support. She shared the news with Daniel later that night. They sat at the kitchen table, the same place where they had first spoken openly about their situations. Daniel listened quietly as she explained. He felt a mix of emotions. On one hand, he was happy that she had a chance to move forward. On the other hand, he knew the house would feel empty again when she left. Still, he understood that this was part of her journey. "That sounds like a good opportunity," he said calmly. "You've worked hard. You deserve a chance to build your own path." "I wouldn't have made it this far without your help," she replied. "You gave me time to think and to stand again." In the days that followed, they prepared for her next step. Lynn arranged her plans carefully and continued working until the last possible day. Daniel helped where he could, offering rides and support. They didn't talk too much about the coming goodbye, but both of them knew it was approaching. Instead, they focused on the present moments, making the most of the time they still had. Their conversations became thoughtful but calm. They spoke about the unexpected way their lives had crossed paths. They acknowledged that neither of them had planned this chapter, yet it had changed them both. Daniel had learned that even when plans fall apart, something meaningful can still grow. Lynn had learned that kindness from a stranger could create a safe place during a difficult time. As the day of her departure grew closer, the house felt filled with quiet understanding. There was no tension or sadness that needed to be spoken loudly. There was simply a shared respect and gratitude. Both of them knew that this chapter of their lives had value. It had brought growth, patience, and a new way of looking at the world. On their last evening together in the house, they sat on the porch as the sun set behind the trees. The sky turned shades of orange and purple. The road remained quiet, just as it had always been. But for Daniel, it no longer felt like a road that led only to loneliness. It felt like a place where unexpected stories could begin. Lynn looked around at the peaceful surroundings and smiled gently. "I'll always remember this place," she said. Daniel nodded. "So will I," he replied. "It's been a different kind of chapter, but a good one." They sat there until the sky grew dark and the stars appeared. Neither of them rushed to go inside. They simply enjoyed the quiet moment, knowing that life was about to move forward again. The future was still uncertain, but it no longer felt frightening. It felt open, full of possibilities neither of them could have predicted when they first met at the train station. The morning of Lynn's departure arrived quietly. The sky was pale and calm, and a light breeze moved through the trees near Daniel's house. Inside, the house felt both familiar and slightly different. For weeks, it had held the sound of two people moving through the same space. Now it felt like it was preparing to return to the stillness it once knew. Daniel woke up early and sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea. He stared at the window, watching the road outside. He knew this day would come. From the moment Lynn first arrived, he understood that her stay was temporary. Still, the thought of the house becoming quiet again made him feel thoughtful. He wasn't sad in a heavy way, but he felt the kind of calm that comes before a big change. Lynn came into the kitchen a few minutes later. She had packed most of her things the night before. Her bag rested near the door, ready for the journey ahead. She greeted Daniel with a gentle smile, the same calm expression she had carried since the day they met. They sat together and shared a simple breakfast. The conversation was soft and unhurried. They spoke about the road ahead, about the city she would soon see, and about the new job opportunity waiting for her.
I feel nervous, Lynn admitted.
But I also feel ready. That's a good feeling, Daniel replied. It means you're moving forward. She nodded. I couldn't have done this without the time I spent here. You gave me a place to think clearly. Daniel gave a small smile. You gave this house some life, he said. It was good for both of us. After breakfast, they loaded her bag into the truck. The drive to the bus station was quiet but peaceful. The road stretched ahead, lined with fields and small houses. Daniel focused on driving, while Lynn looked out the window, taking in the scenery one last time. Wanted to remember the calm of this place. It had been a stop in her journey, but it had also been a safe space during a time of uncertainty. When they reached the station, the bus had not yet arrived. They stood together near the platform. The air was cool, and the sound of distant traffic filled the background. For a moment, they simply stood side by side, not rushing the moment. Thank you for everything, Lynn said quietly. I will always be grateful. You don't have to thank me, Daniel replied. You worked hard and stayed strong. You found your way forward. She looked at him with sincere appreciation. Still, your kindness made a big difference. Daniel nodded. He did not know what else to say. Sometimes words were not enough to explain a shared experience. He was glad that their paths had crossed, even if it had been unexpected. When the bus finally arrived, Lynn picked up her bag and turned to him one last time. They shared a simple goodbye. There was no dramatic moment, no long speech, just a quiet understanding that their time together had mattered. She stepped onto the bus and found a seat by the window. As the bus pulled away, she gave a small wave. Daniel returned it and stood there until the bus disappeared down the road. The drive back home felt different from the drive to the station. The road looked the same, but Daniel felt a shift inside himself. He realized that the house would be quiet again, but not in the same way as before. He no longer felt the deep loneliness that had once filled his days. The time he had spent helping Lynn had changed his perspective. It had reminded him that life could still bring unexpected connections. When he arrived home, he walked through the front door slowly. The house was tidy and calm. The extra cup on the kitchen table was gone, and the guest room was empty. Yet the house did not feel heavy. It felt peaceful, like a place that had witnessed a meaningful chapter. He opened a window and let fresh air move through the rooms. Then he sat down on the porch, just as he had done many evenings before. The days that followed returned to a familiar routine. Daniel went back to work at the repair shop. He greeted neighbors and continued his quiet life. But inside, he felt lighter. He had learned that even when plans did not go as expected, something valuable could still grow from the situation. He had also learned that offering kindness to someone else could bring a sense of purpose to his own life. From time to time, Lynn sent messages to let him know how she was doing. She found a small apartment in the city and started her new job. She wrote about learning new things and meeting new people. She also shared that she felt stronger and more confident than before. Daniel was happy to hear that she was doing well. He didn't expect constant updates, but the occasional message reminded him that their connection still existed in a simple way. Seasons began to change. The flowers Daniel had planted months earlier finally bloomed. The yard looked brighter, filled with color. One evening, as he watered the plants, he thought about how much had happened in such a short time. What began as a day of disappointment at the train station had turned into a chapter of growth and understanding. He realized that life rarely follows the exact plans people make. Sometimes the most meaningful experiences come from unexpected moments. Instead of meeting the person he had imagined, he had met someone who needed support. Instead of building the future he had planned, he had helped someone else build theirs. And in doing so, he had found a new sense of calm within himself. One evening, Daniel sat on the porch watching the sunset. The sky turned warm shades of orange and gold. The road in front of his house remained quiet, but it no longer felt like a symbol of waiting. It felt like a reminder that life could bring new stories at any time. He felt grateful for the chapter that had passed and open to whatever might come next. He no longer felt like he was simply waiting for life to begin. Life had already been moving around him, shaping him in quiet ways. The experience with Lynn had taught him patience, empathy, and the value of small connections. It had also shown him that even when a plan falls apart, something meaningful can take its place. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky grew darker, Daniel took a deep breath and allowed himself to feel at peace. The house behind him stood calm and steady. The road ahead stretched into the distance, full of possibilities he could not yet see. He didn't know what the future would bring, but he no longer feared the unknown. Instead, he felt ready for whatever came next, knowing that life had a way of surprising him when he least expected it.